So, sorry, you've been around. So please, we are anxious to listen to you.
Okay, well, thank you, Joni, for that presentation. If for my data point, if you wouldn't mind, maybe letting me know how many people were able to participate today, I'd appreciate it. Thank
Looks
you.
like
Uh,
13.
13. Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. As Shoni said, my name is Dianne Bowen Coleman. I'm the statewide human trafficking abatement coordinator in the Special Investigation and Prosecution Division of the Department of the Attorney General. So the other person you see on the screen there is Chuck Fu Louie, or Louie, as he's known, and he's one of the deputy attorneys general that I work with. In our division, we have three deputy attorneys general, one of which is supervising. And our Special Investigation and Prosecution Division was established in 2022, pretty much from the legislature, because the legislature realized that we needed a division that could take care of not only human trafficking, but also corruption, fraud, and economic crimes. I do not have anything to do with that. I'm only for the human trafficking abatement section. But as you can imagine, our mission is to investigate and prosecute public corruption and human trafficking cases ethically and efficiently. So a bill, HB 579, went through many changes in the legislature and became an act, Act 083, in June 14th of 2023, and that officially established the Human Trafficking Prevention Program for the state of Hawaii within the Department of the Attorney General. So that lays out what we and the Department of the Attorney General and the Human Trafficking abatement section need to do. We need to try to prevent trafficking, assist victims, increase victim services, promote public awareness through events, outreach, talks to the Rotary, education in schools, educating and training our law enforcement. And of course, this is definitely not a job that one person can do alone. This is something that all of us working together. That includes Rotarians, it includes service providers, federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies, all of us working together to even attempt to make a dent in this issue. So what we're going to learn today are what are some of the vulnerabilities that make people susceptible to trafficking. And also very important is, okay, we suspect something. Now, what do we do? So what is human trafficking? So instead of taking a very wordy definition from the federal government, I broke it down like this. So it's action, means, and purpose. So the action of human trafficking is the recruitment, harboring, the transportation, the provision, the obtaining, patronizing, soliciting, and advertising through force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of commercial sexual exploitation, sex trafficking, or labor trafficking. Now, if you go back to action, the patronizing, soliciting, and advertising is for sex trafficking only. So that is not part of the definition for labor trafficking. And minors who are induced into commercial sex acts of human trafficking are victims regardless of force, fraud, or coercion. So there are many different types of trafficking: sexual exploitation, forced labor, forced marriage, organ removal. We're not going to be going through all of those today. Today, it's going to be mostly focused on sex trafficking, sexual exploitation, and then a little bit of labor trafficking as well. So what are the numbers? Well, illegal profits for human trafficking across the globe, according to the International Labor Organization, is 150 billion. But Hope for Justice thinks that it's at least 100 billion more than that, so 245 billion. And the U.S. Department of State estimates over 27 million victims exist worldwide. And the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime estimates that 20% of the victims globally are children. However, in some parts of Africa and the Mekong region, children are the majority, up to 100% in parts of West Africa. And what you see in Hawaii, I don't have this on the screen, but what you see in Hawaii are sex trafficking, commercial sexual exploitation of children, and labor trafficking. the numbers aren't really good, and there's lots of reasons for that. Part of which is for the youth. Some of them don't even realize that they're being trafficked. They don't think they're being trafficked because they think that that person is in love with them. And I can get into more details with that further on. The other thing is that nobody is collecting information or hadn't been collecting information, or who's collecting what information. So working in silos really doesn't benefit the greater good. We need to, like I said, all be coming together and partner and collaborate in this. And again, there's other reasons for data not being there, but that, according to the legislature, is one of the things that I need to try to track down and find out what some of our numbers might be. So, yeah, that's on my agenda this year. Human trafficking as a business. Well, why is it such a big business? Well, there's endless supply, people are reusable, and there's high demand. So if I'm going to sell a gun or some drugs, I can only sell those one time. If I'm going to sell a human being, I can sell that human being over and over and over again. So that's the endless supply, reusable. And unfortunately, there is that high demand. If we didn't have a demand, then we wouldn't need to be supplying. It's also very low risk. The trafficker is extremely insulated. They're often far removed from what is actually taking place. And unfortunately, there's little chance of victims testifying. So one of the ways that we're trying to in the recent years, trying to help with that, with victims not wanting to testify, is we have victim advocates. So different agencies, including law enforcement, have victim advocates where they can walk alongside the victim. So who are the traffickers? Frankly, the traffickers can be anybody. It could be your next door neighbor. They are there to prey on the vulnerable. They are there to profit from the exploitation of their victims. They can be of any race, nationality, gender, sexual orientation. They may be your family members or friends. It could be that person's romantic or intimate partner. It could be acquaintances or strangers. It could be gang members, business owners, farm or factory managers. So who are the buyers? Again, the buyers can be anyone. It's a business of supply and demand, with the victims as the supply and the customers as the demand. So it could be business professionals, it could be drug dealers, the faith-based community, your family member, the whole list there. Military, we see here in Hawaii. We do see that a lot. The professional athletes, the service providers, sports coaches. Um, I'll give you an example, and I'm not speaking out of turn here. You can actually Google it, which is what I did. But Snoop Dogg talks about how he would get a huge bus of women and show up at a huge sporting event and basically sell the women. So who are the victims? Well, the victims can be anyone. So it this uh, this crime, it knows no boundaries, whether it's the victim, a buyer, or the trafficker. So again, the victim can be of any age, any race, ethnicity, sex, sexual orientation, immigration status, nationality. It doesn't matter. It just knows no boundaries. People who are most vulnerable are those in the child welfare, juvenile justice or foster care systems, are runaways, homeless, and throwaways, persons with disabilities, the LGBTQ2S plus, women and girls. But let's not forget that men and boys are trafficked as well. Substance use issues, those who are suffering from that, victims of intimate partner violence, domestic violence, and other forms of sexual assault. Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders are unfortunately overrepresented here in Hawaii with human trafficking. American Indians and Alaska Natives, individuals seeking asylum, migrant laborers, undocumented workers, persons with limited English proficiency, most vulnerable. So what are some additional risk factors and other common vulnerabilities that traffickers look for and exploit? Poverty, familial instability, If you're, if you're like the middle child in the family and you're not getting that attention, you're going to be seeking that attention elsewhere. Low self-esteem or self-worth, mental health challenges, a lack of an education or truancy, not showing up to get your education, isolation, family background in trafficking. If you have a family background in trafficking, chances are you may be, trafficking your children as well. Risky sexual behaviors or displaced by social or natural disasters. Look at the Maui wildfires and how many people were displaced by that. Those are very vulnerable situations and very vulnerable people for the traffickers. And so, what are we looking for? What does a potential trafficking victim look like? Well, they're often fearful, they're anxious, they're appeared depressed, they're submissive, they could be tense or nervous, they're unusually fearful and have anxious behavior after bringing up law enforcement because the trafficker has told them, if you don't do what I'm telling you to do, I'm going to make sure that you're arrested. They're hypervigilant, constantly, checking out the environment. That said, they avoid eye contact. They especially avoid eye contact with other males. They think about suicide or try to attempt suicide. They could have multiple cell phones. Now, I have given presentations in school before, and I have held up my two cell phones. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm a trafficking victim, but a teenager doesn't normally have two cell phones. Multiple social media accounts where they've got one that's particularly for that person. I'm talking about a youth now that thinks that they're in love with somebody. Other abnormal behaviors is that they're not allowed or able to speak for themselves, or they're not able to speak to an individual alone. So, say a teenager comes into a clinic or the emergency department, and they've got an older, authoritative, like adult with them. That authoritative adult likely does not allow that youth or that teen to speak. They speak on that individual's behalf, and they don't want that young person to be alone with any healthcare provider because they fear what that youth or teen may be saying to that healthcare provider. So one way that a healthcare provider can separate the two so that they could have a private conversation with that youth or teen is to say something along the lines of, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to take an x-ray, and we're going to be taking her to the radiology or the imaging department, and we have to take them alone, and you're not, I'm sorry, but you can't, you can wait here in the waiting room. So that's one way to separate them. You can, when you're talking to the individual, you can see that the answers appear to be scripted or rehearsed because the traffickers have told them what to say. They could say that they're just visiting, but they really don't know where they are. That lack of knowledge of the whereabouts, that's one thing that the traffickers are good at, is keeping that youth or that teen, that individual, in a place where they don't know where they are. Or here in Hawaii, for the state of Hawaii, they can move them from island to island. For the continent, so the 48 contiguous states, oftentimes you don't know when you're crossing a state line. And that's one way that the traffickers keep control over that person, is moving them from state to state so that they never know where they are. They have a loss of sense of time, and that partially could be because of the trauma and the trauma brain that they're developing. It could also be because traffickers induce drugs. It could also be because the traffickers introduced alcohol. There's often numerous inconsistencies in their stories, and that is also a problem when it comes to testifying, because that individual now has, a trauma brain, and a trauma brain, you don't think linearly. You don't think from this happened, then this happened, then this happened, because it just, you're not functioning that way. You might remember something, and then you might remember something else, but they're not sequential. So oftentimes, if somebody doesn't know and isn't somebody who might be interviewing or a law enforcement who may, initially come across somebody, if they don't have that background or that training and what trauma informed is and what basic stuff about how the brain functions or dysfunctions and trauma situations, then it's understandably easy to see where they would think, oh, they're not truthful. The stories are different every time. Well, yes, the stories are different every time because that's a trauma brain. And they may have a few or no personal possessions. So some physical signs that you might see, they could be malnourished. They could show signs of physical sexual abuse, physical restraint, even torture. Then you might see self-mutilation. There's often insomnia and fatigue, and they look tired. They could experience dizziness and chronic pain. They could be dressed inappropriately, inappropriate for the weather, or inappropriate for the situation, or inappropriate for their age. They could have untreated medical issues. They could have HIV and STIs, sexually transmitted infections that are untreated. They could have drug misuse. They could also be wearing high-end labels and have high-end accessories. And a lot of this is in the initial grooming stage where that trafficker is saying, I love you, and buys them all these things and takes them out for nice meals and takes them to nice events and dresses them up and does their hair and nails. But then there's also tattoos and branding, which is a physical sign. So there's all kinds of tattoos and brandings that you might see, and some of them literally say property of that person. And the one in the middle is what's called this guy, this trafficker was known as the cowboy, and he had his cowboy's decree that he would put on the backs of his victims. And a lot of times, what you see are crowns and cash signs. So, and just to go back to the tattoos, there are some organizations. There's one in New York City, as a matter of fact. Honestly, I'm not sure about Hawaii. That's more research that I need to do. But and I'm sure there's places elsewhere where they will remove tattoos for these victims. So, what are some of the work and living conditions that you might see? And this also includes labor trafficking, especially labor trafficking. They're unpaid, paid very little, or paid only through tips. The employer is holding all the identity documents. The workers work excessively long or unusual hours. They're not allowed to take breaks. They suffer under these restrictions. They could potentially owe a large debt and are never able to pay it off. They were recruited through false promises concerning the nature and conditions of the work. And this could be for, child labor as well, not just adult. They're not in control of their own money. They have no financial records or bank accounts, and they are not in control of their own ID or passport. And we're going to get into how traffickers lure people in and the grooming process. So this is more for sex trafficking, but also labor trafficking. But they make false promises, and like I said, they prey on the vulnerable. So the promise of a loving, intimate partner or marriage. I love you. We're going to get married. We're going to have this fabulous life. The trafficker says to this youth or teen. There's unfortunately familial recruitment, as we've mentioned. There's this great job offer or advertisement, and many years ago, my oldest daughter, as a teenager, um, was at a birthday party in Waikiki on the beach, and she came back and told me that somebody approached two of her friends who were there on the beach in their bathing suits, saying, we can make you a model. Okay. Fortunately, they didn't fall into that and came back to the birthday party, but incredible. Um, they're posing as a benefactor, and then again, false promises or fraud. And homeless youth. I know you've just had a homeless presentation on the homeless and houseless. They're the most vulnerable for trafficking as a means to survive. The youth in foster care, they're vulnerable. They're seeking long-lasting relationships. The LGBTQ2S plus are at risk because they seek friends and acceptance. But again, as we recall, any child, teen can be a victim of human trafficking. And so now the stages for grooming. So that trafficker, I'm checking the time. Okay, that trafficker is identifying and targeting that victim. They'll look. They could be at Pearl Ridge Mall, for example. That's one place. So at Pearl Ridge Mall, the traffickers could just be roaming around. They look like anybody else, and they're looking for that vulnerable individual. And then once they found that vulnerable individual, then they start making a contact and trying to make a connection, gain their trust, gain access to that individual. They're actually playing a role in that child's life and filling a need. Maybe that child is looking for acceptance. Maybe that child is looking for love. Maybe that child is looking for someone just to pay attention to them and hear them. And at a certain point, then the trafficker is going to introduce drugs or alcohol, and they're isolating the child. They're creating secrecy around that child. So they isolate the child by spending a lot of time with the child. So the child or the teen can't spend time with anybody else. They're creating secrecy by saying, okay, I love you and I want to take care of you, but we need to keep this relationship secret. Don't tell your family. They give them that second cell phone. They say, this is for you to be able to reach me anytime because I love you so much. And I want you to be able to contact me whenever you want, but don't tell anybody. Don't tell your family. Don't tell anybody about the cell phone. Then they start normalizing touch and sexualizing the relationship and introducing sex into the relationship. And then again, that individual is, I'm in love. They love me. We're going to have a great life together. Then they start normalizing abuse, and then they begin the manipulation. Well, you have to do this because I bought you all these things. You have to do this because I took you out to all these meals. And I see the breakout thing there. So I'm going to, okay, so why don't they leave? So there's lots of reasons why victims don't leave. They're completely reliant on the trafficker. They're in a hopeless situation. Yes. Oh, there's a lot of shame and self-blame. They don't see themselves as a victim. They fear for themselves or their family because the trafficker has said, if you don't do what I'm telling you to do, I'm going to hurt you or I'm going to hurt your family. And I know where you live. Um, let's see, I'm trying to get to the next slide. Okay. There's a lack of support or awareness of available services. And that's one of the things that we're working on is to make sure that victims know that there are services out there. They may be addicted to drugs. And so the trafficker is their supplier. There's that trauma bond that is created. Am I going to be taken out in like a minute?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes.
okay. All right. Let me get, okay. So there's protective factors and that we need to work on with our youth and our teens, especially. Then there are more protective factors. The most important thing is having at least one trusted adult. That kid has one trusted adult. They've got that chance. And I want to get to, there's lots of things we can do to prevent human trafficking, but I want to get to this slide here. If you want to take a screenshot of this slide, this is who you call. This is the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And there are numbers here in the state of Hawaii to call as well. And
Once everybody, yeah, I'm not sure who's